Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to each of the witnesses. The advocates of the Green New Deal like to pitch their proposals in high-sounding rhetoric, but the reality of their proposals are that they would do four things. They would hurt the poor, they would hurt the working class, they would give special benefits and subsidies to the rich, and they would hurt the environment. The advocates of the Green New Deal like to pretend that they follow the science, that the laws of supply and demand somehow don't apply to them. And they pretend that by spending trillions of dollars, we're saving money. In a country that is blessed with vast natural resources, we should be paying a fraction of the price for electricity and gasoline. But because of bad policies at the local, state, and federal level, Californians pay on average twice as much per kilowatt for electricity and $1 more per gallon of gas as people in Texas and most of the country. And if you want to understand the Green New Deal, it is to bring the failed energy policies of California to force them on the rest of the country. And for anyone who might pause to say, well, what's so wrong with that? You can look no further than a census report released this month, September of 2021, that concluded out of 50 states, which state has the highest level of poverty? The answer is, of course, the state of California, as it was the year before, as it was the year before, as it was the year before. California, according to the Census Bureau's latest calculation, 15.4% of California residents lived in poverty from 2018 to 2020. There's only one place in the United States that exceeds the poverty level for California, and that is the place we find ourselves right now, the District of Columbia. D.C. has the highest poverty level. California has the second. Now, what do those two jurisdictions share in common? They are governed exclusively by Democrats. They are governed by policies that drive up the costs of working class people, of low-income people, and at the same time give generous subsidies to millionaires. So the proposals we have before us are to force Americans to shift from their gas furnace to a heat pump. They are to force Americans to shift from their car or truck in their driveway to a much higher-priced electric vehicle, to give them no choice in the matter, but not only that, in doing so, to hurt the environment. Right now, a significant percentage of electricity is produced by coal-fired plants. As a very practical step, if you are shifting from a gas to an electric vehicle in a jurisdiction where your electricity is coming from coal, you are moving to a dirtier and more environmentally damaging way of travel. It's also worth noting that of every country on earth, there's one country that has reduced CO2 more than any other country, and that is the country we are in right now, the United States of America. The United States of America has reduced CO2 emissions steadily. They peaked in 2007, and they have been steadily declining ever since. Right now, today, we emit the same amount of CO2 as we did in the early 1990s, and even less methane, despite having a population of 60 million more. Now, why is that? The principal driver of our steady reduction in CO2 is the substitution of natural gas for coal production and electricity. If the advocates of the Green New Deal actually believed their rhetoric that reducing CO2 was a good thing, they wouldn't fight tooth and nail to kill natural gas production, to kill natural gas pipelines, to shut it down. Mr. Matusiak, your biography says that you are a managing partner of an advisory firm focused on addressing climate change and economic inequality. Suppose that the electrification policy you've testified about today were to be implemented fully and entirely, what would be the temperature effect by the year 2100 using the EPA's own climate model?
Thank you, Senator Cruz. I haven't done that calculation on the back of this testimony, but what I would say is that if we were going to fully implement the climate policy we're talking about today, we would be ensuring on a voluntary basis that homeowners all across the country, households all across the country, would be able to elect to purchase a heat pump water heater, a space heater, induction stove.
So, sir, if you haven't done the research on what the climate benefit would be from the policies you're advocating using the EPA's own model, I'll tell you what they would be. According to the EPA's own model, in 2100, so 80 years from now, global temperature would be lowered by 0.173 degrees Celsius. And in exchange for that, you would impose trillions of dollars of costs on African Americans, on Hispanics, on low-income Americans, and you would drive up poverty across the country. It's difficult to ascertain why that's good for this country.
So I would just respond by saying a couple of things. The first is that 40% of our emissions are come from decisions made around the kitchen table in households all across America. The effect of the policy that we're talking about here today is to drive 40% of those emissions down to zero. The component piece of that with respect to America's contribution to global emissions would be the 40% of America's contribution to global emissions.
Do you dispute the APA number?
The gentleman's time has expired.
The effect on American households would be to put money back into the pockets of American families, because the reality is that people are paying way too much on their energy bills, and those energy bills, as was stated earlier by one of your colleagues, are inelastic. People have to pay.
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Matusiak. Congressman Trone has been.
Don't want him to answer that one?
I would be happy to let him answer that one. If
good. I would welcome. Do you dispute the EPA number?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Do you dispute the EPA number that the effect of all these proposals by the year 2100 would be to decrease global temperature by 0.173 degrees Celsius?
What I know is what we are stacking in terms of emissions as a country. And what I know is what our North Star needs to be. And our North Star needs to be to get to zero.
Okay,
and the only way to get to zero is to electrify as many of the things as we can in this economy. Thank you.
Congressman Trone, thanks for your patience.
Mr. Chairman, would it be okay if I asked a few questions rather than give a partisan speech?
It would.